Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second year exhibition, Escape Room. As a group, we are really excited to showcase you our work. We are a group combined of 11 students, all in our second year of photography. Before we take a look at all of our hard work, I'll start off by reading our group statement. Escape Room is an insight into our own personal experience with freedom, the topic of which comes close to all of our hearts for a multitude of different reasons. Escape Room celebrates and expresses the journey of freedom, the lack of, and the finding of, with each individual piece of work and participation revealing a gratifying and intimate outlook surrounding freedom. We have specifically chosen to look at our right to express and indulge in our own freedom and how this was taken from us due to the global pandemic. One of the most significant factors that gave us inspiration in creating our exhibition. The theme of the work can be separated into a multitude of different categories. The main underlying theme is freedom, but with that comes individualization of what that word means to different people. For instance, music is considered an outlet for some, a form of freedom. Yet to someone else, a lonely street which once contained swarms of life that become desolate can be considered as a form of freedom. The personal story each photographer's work showcases within the exhibition radiates an intimate view into their outlook and expressions of freedom. We hope you enjoy each little glimpse into our own individual perceptions in creating Escape Room. You belong somewhere you feel free. Tom Petty. So we'll get started by having a little look at our guest speaker, David Spence. David Spence is a playwright and very kindly had a little look at some of our work throughout progression and through the final stages. And David decided that he was going to write a text for us, but he also recorded an audio piece, which we will give a little listen to now, while also taking a look at some of our progression images, some of the images that didn't make it into the final cut.
Freedom, the state of being allowed to do what you want to do. That's how the Collins English Dictionary defines freedom. I have my problems with this. For example, being allowed implies permission, and who wants permission to be free? However, of the many different definitions on offer, it is useful, not least because it anchors the agency of intention within the individual. Freedom, especially when considering COVID-19 restrictions, has been a much questioned concept. These restrictions include freedom to gather, to move, to be intimate, and to be social. I don't see these as wants, but as basic human needs. Therefore, perhaps freedom is better defined as the state of being able to do what you need to do. And if so, currently, we are unfree, alive, but in a world without touch. Therefore, gathering these images under the banner of freedom is not only worthy of attention, it is timely and inspired. Currently, even in our affluent society, freedoms can't be taken for granted, with many unable to access basic needs. These are indeed difficult times, and these are photographs for those times. The following discussion doesn't include images unavailable at the time of writing. I hope it hides preference and does not comment on the photographic quality, because as a layperson I couldn't do it anyway. Portraits. In current circumstances, unsurprisingly, the portraits are of individuals, not groups. I felt drawn to the young woman jumping into the sky. It reminded me of Catherine Mansfield's Bliss. In Mansfield's story, a debutante asks herself what to do with bliss, remembering that as a girl, she just skipped down the street to express her happiness, but now with adult restrictions on how to properly express emotions, she could no longer just jump into the sky. I read this leap into the air as a much-needed moment, an expression of bliss. So too the young woman in the bath, smiling, surrounded by flowers, seems to be an expression of pleasure. Initially I thought of Elizabeth Siddal. Siddal spent 5 months in a heated Victorian bath, posing as Ophelia for Milles's painting. Eventually the heating failed and she caught pneumonia and almost, like her namesake, died. Therefore it pleased me to see the young woman smile. She's not unhappy, not suicidal. Those flowers are not a wreath, rather a beautification. The model is conscious of the process, and so we're not witnessing, we're not being voyeurs. It's an intimate portrait of pleasure designed to be consumed in public. The monochrome young woman, her face gauzed by tights, borrows from Hollywood's glamour era, when the best of the starlets had real power and agency. However, a closer look at the eyes and nose suggests restriction, distortion, and some degree of worried reflection, themes that continue into the accompanying image of hands reaching outside into the sky, impeded in that movement by the fabric. There's something about escape, about restriction, that seems very much of now, of the pandemic. What stays with me is not the restriction, rather the intention in the hands to force themselves out through the tights and penetrate the sky. The image that mutated the most between being received and now were the young woman on the bench, or perhaps sitting in the road, and the same woman with her ear to the ground, and figuratively what that all means. Okay, I'm going to start that again. The image that mutated the most between being received and now were the young woman on the bench, the same woman with her ear to the ground, and figuratively all that suggests. Context brings weight to any image. After Sarah Everard's murder, it's difficult to see a woman alone in an isolated space and not wonder what might happen, wonder how her smile can swiftly disappear, or how that gentle stillness of her lying in the road could go terribly wrong. If you find the above hyperbole, or that it doesn't apply to all the images of single females in this exhibition, consider the remark by American feminist poet Muriel Ruxinger. What would happen if one woman told the truth of her life? The world would split open. The remaining photographs I've chosen to divide into cinematic categories: exterior, interior, and interior to exterior.
A very big thank you to David there for recording an audio piece about our work throughout progression and throughout the final images. Now we are going to start to look at everyone's individual works. So we will be starting with my own, which is Watching the World Go By me, Yasmin Marrow. So I will read out my artist statement. There are pre-recorded audios for artist statements, which we will be playing throughout. It's easy to feel trapped in a room. My window is my escape. It's a place I look to when I need a little bit of freedom. It's a place I can sit watching the world go by. Freedom to me is the accessibility to the outside world, a window, which is something we may take for granted, but that window allows us a glimpse to the outside when we may not be ready to leave the inside. The past year has been a difficult one, with being encouraged to stay indoors, with the fear of this nasty virus looming over people's heads. My window has allowed me to still experience the world. It has allowed me the freedom I needed during a very testing time. My photographs displayed in this exhibition are taken from my university bedroom window, a place I have become very familiar with. Positioned just above my desk, it gives me a lovely view of the reception of my accommodation. I photographed my window to represent freedom. Because my window allows me an outside view, it gives me the freedom to watch the world go by. As someone who sometimes struggles to leave my room due to my mental health, being able to have that escape has always been important to me. No matter how I'm feeling, I will always draw back the curtains and allow the natural light to flood in. This has been a very testing year for everyone, with our sense of freedom having been stripped away from us. I was very excited when, as a group, we came up with the theme freedom. I was excited to create work myself and see the work produced by the rest of the group. Everyone's idea of freedom is different, but here is a little glimpse of mine. So that was Watching the World Go By myself, Yasmin Marrow. Next, we will be looking at Aisha Khan's work, and this is called The Drive Away.
Freedom. The power to think and act how one wants. These two very complex images represent the simplicity of my freedom and what escapism means to me. During this lockdown, it was a very difficult period of time for me. I remember almost feeling trapped within myself, and my only escape was to drive, even if there was no location. It was very therapeutic for me, as not being allowed out affected my mental space. Driving was the only thing I enjoyed to clear my head from a long day. Windows down, music loud, sometimes silence. My inspiration for these images came from an artist called Christopher Hubble. All his images have no computer manipulation and are executed with one exposure. He developed a very good technical knowledge which gave him the freedom to create photographs at his own imagination. Long exposure photography was something out of my comfort zone, and it was something I wanted to try for a long time. Cars are a getaway from life, and no matter what, they will always be my escape.
So that was Aisha Khan's work with The Drive Away. Next up, we have Taiba Mahmood with Freedom.
Through experimentation and research, observing freedom through the essence of nature and light frames the body of this project. In this current climate, our relationship with freedom has altered significantly due to the pandemic. These two images portray the journey in hope to becoming free again. The path is only leading us forward, resembling freedom being ahead. The rays of sunlight, golden hue, and a brightened exposure represent the brightened path ahead, hope for normality. Sunlight is commonly associated with a favourable connotation. It obviously brings light, dispels darkness, and is the fundamental good in the fight between becoming free and being free. It is also connected with summer, bringing back pleasant memories of light, airy, happy and beautiful days, immediately planting a seed of hope and positive thoughts. The model looking down resembles her seeking for freedom due to the restrictions of current circumstances and the ongoing search for a sense of normality in a very abnormal time. The image is slightly darker as the frame features a vignette effect surrounding the model, in comparison to the path, thus foreshadows finding freedom. The wall acts as a barrier as freedom lies over the wall. The subtle yet bold pink skirt resembles hope and the essence of a soul building up as a soul gets a glimpse of freedom over the wall, which acts as looking into a reflection of the model's self of being free and whole again.
That was Freedom by Taiba Mahmood. Next up, we have Dreamland by Francesca Ward.
Freedom can't be defined as one specific thing. Everyone has the right to freedom, and everyone finds it in different ways. As soon as I think of freedom, my mind instantly goes to the outdoors. Being able to walk as far as I want, nothing around me, nothing to stop me. I want my images to portray the feeling I get when I'm surrounded by nature and open space. I want people to feel calm and relaxed whilst looking at my work. I want them to escape from the realities they are facing with the pandemic and take a moment to feel free. Anne McKinnell is a landscape photographer who has had a big influence on my work. Her images are simple to look at yet have so much detail when you look closer. Researching into how she took her photos taught me so much about landscape photography, not just the technical side, but also how to enjoy creating images. I never went out specifically to do photo shoots. I always took the photos when I felt a connection with my surroundings. Being in lockdown encouraged me to go on a lot more walks, and this is where I discovered the amazing landscapes not far from my house. I would always take a moment to look at the nature around me, then take a photo to try and capture that feeling I get. That's my escape.
That was Dreamland by Francesca Ward. Next up, we have Privilege and Immunity by Finlay Hall.
Most people hear a word and interpret it so differently from the other. So if I said the word freedom to you, how would you respond? Looking into gender politics and photography leads to questions that may be answered completely differently from females to males. So, how can this be expressed through photography as a female photographer? Gender politics can be identified as a particular form of freedom that will be compromised by whichever gender you may be. This idea is what provoked the imagery that has been produced for this exhibition. Everybody will have a different definition of freedom from a feeling, space, person, or place. When choosing to photograph freedom, many different types of this theme could be captured. Again, something like person or feeling, etc. But the main focus of my imagery was initially relating to the works of Marilyn Muggett and Rachel Brown, both females who were unaccompanied at night, being vulnerable, scared, and inevitably alone to guard themselves. This idea of becoming free from the images and at the place that they were taken at were the grounds of making my own images. This then posed a question of what may be freeing, or if this may have inevitably stopped me from taking the photographs in the first place. Henceforth, this is why the imagery that I have produced, the process in which it has been made, has been done in those particular mannerisms of Muggett and Brown. Being alone at night is a privilege that not both genders always receive. This imagery composed throws that particular norm out of the window to raise awareness of how females alone at night may not be safe. Capturing these sorts of images that I have produced, named Immunity and Privilege, that follow the relationship to that of Brown and Muggett by exploring being alone at night. Using a wide-angle lens to capture the imagery was an important part of the making process. This then enabled me to literally capture the bigger picture. Additionally, using an extremely wide-angle lens, this helped me distort the images slightly and showing exactly what I was seeing at the time. Capturing freedom with a wide-angle lens I felt was an important part of the development process so that you can see the whole thought mechanism behind the final photographs. To further the process of making, using natural lighting for the imagery was an also important step of how it affected the editing and the final outcomes. Producing imagery with the only artificial light provided by the streets made this development process of the images seem more absolute. This kind of lighting happened to be my only safety for myself at night, so capturing that safety in my images was key for the ideas of freedom to be unobscured or distorted. Thank you for listening. Many thanks from Finlay.
That was Privilege and Immunity by Finlay Hall. Next up, we have Liberty and Bird by Niamh Porteous.
The subject matter of freedom and all that it entails is very important to me, mainly because I never feel like I have any in my day-to-day life. Throughout dealing with mental health problems for the majority of my teenage and young adult years, my mind rarely feels free from the hands of worry and anxiety, which results in my mind never being in a relaxed state, and this repetitive cycle is now my new normal. When we decided to use the topic of freedom as the catalyst for our exhibition, I immediately assumed my work would revolve around my negative journey of struggling with loss, and how I felt as though I was going through life feeling trapped in my own mind. However, after I thought about the subject matter thoroughly and more in depth, I decided I wanted to challenge my work in hopes I could then challenge my inner demons. I decided to photograph what I felt freedom would truly look and feel like for me, instead of focusing on what it looks like to feel none. I wanted to attempt to radiate positivity from a negative situation in my life and attempt to change my outlook on it. The choice to use a female model instead of myself was a conscious decision, purely based around the fact that I am not yet at one with myself. It felt more dreamlike and more suitable to use a model which could then represent a bettered version of myself. I decided to have my model surrounded by a few different elements that make my mind and body feel at peace. Through the incorporation of my model being submerged in a bathtub and then adding bright and vivid coloured flowers into the mix. I feel like this project was quite therapeutic for me, to photograph and create images of how I envision my future self, surrounded by peacefulness, but most importantly looking as though their mind has eradicated any form of negativity and worry, purely to be left feeling free.
That was Liberty and Bird by Neve Porteous. Next up, we have Into the Forest and the Clouds Below by Alyssa Abid.
The word freedom can be interpreted in many different ways, but for me it means to be able to explore wherever you want without questioning your actions or worrying about the consequences. Inspired by artists such as Sebastian Magnani and Cody Williams-Smith, the photographs that I've created represent the idea of being able to escape to another dimension through a portal in order to get away from our mundane lives and experience something out of the ordinary. This past year has proven to be very difficult for me. Not being allowed to leave the house and go wherever I decide was something that I struggled to come to terms with. After a while, being stuck behind closed doors became overwhelming, and the need to escape out into the open became a necessity. Dovestones Reservoir became the one place I could escape to, clear my mind and feel a sense of freedom, which is why I decided that it'd be the best location for my images. Walking through the forest, listening to the running water, the wind dancing through the trees, rustling the leaves, and the sound of the birds chirping above me provided the feeling of serenity that I was searching for. I want you, as the audience, to be able to understand the sense of escapism that I felt whilst taking these images and feel the urge to explore by jumping through the portal leading to another dimension, an idea I wish that I could do during this global pandemic.
That was Into the Forest and the Clouds Below by Alyssa Abid. Up next, we have Perspectives by Katie Pickering.
When thinking about what freedom means to me, I instantly go to a quiet space, mentally and physically, where I can be by myself. As an insider looking out, I wanted people to be able to feel the same emotion as I do when looking at my images, that being calmness. Our group theme for this exhibition is freedom. We have not had much of this throughout the last year, and so we thought it would be a perfect way for each individual to choose what freedom meant or means to them. Combining architectural aspects with light and shadows is where I got the idea from when looking at the works of Hiroshi Sugimoto. Instantly, I felt calm when looking at his images, such as the seascapes, for example, as they are very minimalistic and soft-looking. Still images can stop the perception of time, and so, although there may have been lots going on behind the scenes of the making of the image, the outcome is totally different, which is something that intrigued me when creating my own set of images. I also find Robert Adams an inspirational figure throughout research about landscapes and photography, because for my second image of the view from my window, I really wanted it to be more than just a typical landscape, and so bringing the open window into the frame, making the perception almost like putting yourself into the photograph and looking out into the world. This short clip was taken at the time of me creating this image, and so hopefully sets the scene. Throughout this project, I've been able to experiment with new ways of taking photographs and working to a different genre of photography, which has been very refreshing, but also letting my freedom take control.
That was Perspectives by Katie Pickering, and next we have Staged by Jack Unsworth.
To begin, I would start by taking the group's theme freedom into my own hands, looking at what my freedom is, where I can escape to, and feel like I'm living life to the fullest. This would be me playing guitar. A photographer that I had found was someone by the name of Adam Elmakias. He is a concert photographer whose images are full of energy and really reminds me of what being on stage is like, which is somewhere where I can express myself the most. The images I saw were a mixture of silhouettes, both vibrant and full of colour, but also black and white. Those images really caught my eye and appealed to me the most. I thought of how I could emulate this on-stage look and how I could achieve this vibrant silhouette style like the lights you would see shining on a stage. Not long after this idea sprung to mind, I thought of some images that I had seen, which consisted of car headlights lighting up the back of a subject, creating a silhouette style that I was looking for, and thought this could work. So I took this idea, and with my friend's car, I used the headlights, put on a timer on the camera, and created self-portrait images of me and my guitar, as if I was on stage. I thoroughly enjoyed this process. After this, I ran the images through Lightroom, changing the colour of the light to this magenta, purple colour like the lights you would see on a stage, creating what you can see now. And this is what my idea of freedom is like. Thank you.
And that was Staged by Jack Unsworth. Next we have Hope and Wonder by Alicia Smith.
Hello, I'm Alicia, and for my work I wanted to focus on my dreams for our subject, freedom. It may be one of the dreams to settle down with a nice house and a family, but freedom for many people like even me are road trips. Road trips are the epitome of freedom. Getting to see the world and all its beauty, it's one of many dreams I have. To capture this, I use my Nikon D3400. Because of the COVID pandemic, I was stuck at home instead of my accommodation in Huddersfield. Because I was a key worker, which cut off my access to the many cameras and lenses available at the university. As a result of this predicament, I used my sister as a model since it was easier as I lived with her. I wanted her facing the road to convey that all she thinks about is travelling with family or friends. For my shoots, I was inspired by Justine Kurland's selected works, Girl Pictures from 1997 to 2002. Kurland has said that she constructs pictures in order to let them unravel, working along a spectrum between the perfect and the real. What I take from this quote is the definition of what a dream is. Adding on to this, I found another photographer on Instagram called John Snip. I took inspiration from one of his images, but changed it to convey her looking away from the camera instead of towards it, almost as if it was a mystery who the person is, like how you could dream up a mystery person. I also made the images more vibrant, more dreamlike, as if she was dreaming being there instead of stuck. I hope you enjoyed the work and the exhibition. Thank you for listening.
That was Hope and Wonder by Alicia Smith. Next up, we have Her Reach and Her Undergoes by Geordie Lawrence.
Freedom is a concept most people consider a basic human right, and while I agree that it should be, that isn't always the case. My thought process behind these images is to show the lack of freedom that everyone has felt over the last year. The day-to-day elements of human life, even the mundane, has been stripped from us all. Being told we can't go outside, can't see others' faces, and can't live like we expect to be able to. It has turned the living into existing and being alive into surviving. These images, with their lack of colour, their cryptic distortion, and their longing towards something beyond vision or reach, aim to convey how this everlasting time loop has reduced us to ghostly shadows of what we once were.
And that concludes our exhibition. We hope that you've really enjoyed everything you've been able to see this evening. And on behalf of myself and our entire group, we want to say a huge thank you for everybody who's managed to come along and to watch today. We have placed the link for Art Steps into the chat below. So if you do want to go back in and have a closer look at some of the images and have more of a look around, you are more than welcome to. I know as a group, we've all really enjoyed creating the work for this and working together to create this space for you guys to enjoy. And we hope that you've enjoyed having a little glimpse into our ideas of freedom. Thank you very much for coming along, guys, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your Wednesday evening.